it's running on max ECU, first one that we got started, so super stoked about that. We still got a long way to go though, but it is actually started. So the next thing on this car, now that the cam and crank are wired up, the cam I may have to go back because it's a VR sensor and you can flip the polarity on them. So I may have to go back and troubleshoot that. I'm not doing that just yet though. I need to attack the main relay. And so the biggest problem that we have here with this car is that these relays were wired in, and when you would key them on, the fans would come on and they would stay on. But here's the problem. The problem is that if you disconnected the fans, the ECU wouldn't come on. And it's tapped into this fuse box area here, and I don't know why or the rhyme or reasons behind it, but this is what I'm all working with here. So this is like, got some Testa tape on it, which is the interior Testa tape, then it's got a ton of electric tape and just all sorts of weird stuff here. So, and it's, more importantly, it's also tapped into the fuse box. So the number one thing is we're going to undo all this wiring and try to make odds or ends out of it. But the main thing is that I need to figure out what's going on with this main relay here before I can really move forward, because I have to start wiring up the main relay on the cockpit of the car to have the max ECU turn it on. So I have all of this removed. This is all the fan wiring here, but it doesn't exactly explain why if you disconnected the fans, it would stop working. Now what I did find is this ground wire here, and this ground wire goes to the starter relay that's been vampire tapped in here. They at least tried to route the wire cleanly down, but that makes sense. So I'm assuming instead of doing the neutral safety switch, they just grounded this, which, you know, it makes the car think that it's in neutral so the starter can activate, which I guess is not the worst way of doing it. But I'm just not sure why. Okay, so this car for sure is an NA, and the reason why we know that is that because in here it's got the position for EFI number 2. EFI number 2 is only used by a TT chassis car, so we knew that from the VIN, but nothing. Oh, I found it. This wire here was tapped for power. Which is from the EFI relay. So that means that, what does that exactly mean? These wires are joined together. I'm not sure if this is part of the same harness or they just wrapped it together. Okay, so at this point, I'm not really too sure. I've got to start working on undoing all this to kind of figure out what on earth is happening here. These wires look like they changed colors a couple times, but ultimately, we need to figure out where these two wires went. This is mainly this wire. These wires I just recently just cut because I couldn't figure out how to wrap it around. So we're gonna tie these together. That way we know what went where. But the main one was this one. What does this wire have to do with the EFI main relay exactly? I don't know. But it was definitely tapped into that. So I guess we're gonna work on undoing all this to figure out where it all goes. So our goal is to trace down this wire here This is the one that was tapped into the main relay for whatever reason. And we're just gonna try to figure out where this is all going. So I'm assuming that they were trying to use it for the key on wire is what I'm assuming, to the relays. Which I guess is fine, but okay, so this wire here, this wire was grounded. So they used the EFI main relay to kick over okay, so it looks like they had the EFI main relay to kick over this relay here, which in turn went down to the fans. But again, I don't understand that. What would happen if you unplug these relays? So you could unplug these relays and the EFI main relay wouldn't kick over. It would just be dead in the water. But okay, well, now that we have a rough idea of what the concept was, we're going to just kind of get rid of all this just all together. So that's gone. So I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna leave this as is. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna leave the fuse box as is. I'm gonna start working backwards to the ECU side of it after I wash my hands from this nasty goop. So I'm pretty sure I figured out what was going on with this main relay stuff here. So the main relay, this gray wire, is actually power from the ECU. So I think that the main relay actually wasn't ever working, and so they tapped it into power, which was this black-red wire in the fuse box here. And so what we're gonna have to do in order to achieve that functionality, we're gonna have to use the secondary harness. The secondary harness has general purpose outputs 15 and 16, which are actually 12 volt out. So what we're gonna do is, unfortunately, we're gonna plug this all in. And I say unfortunately because now we're about to have a bunch of extra wires not actually doing anything. So we're gonna service loop this. I'm gonna move the EGTs out of the way, but we'll service loop it, try to make it the same length, and then we can attach it to the main relay. Okay, so we've got a break or a short somewhere in here from the main relay, and that explains why they did whatever they did, was to jump the main relay to keep it on. So with the output wire here from the max ECU, it's not doing anything. But when I checked it with our power probe, both pins have ground. So that tells me that there's a short or a break somewhere in the wire. And I don't know, there's gonna be some problems here. So I'm going to try not to arc this out like I did a minute ago, which scared the shit out of me. But here's the main relay. So this one has battery power like it's supposed to, but these two other wires are grounded. But this one right here, the gray wire, should have power. So with the power probe plugged in and I trigger it on the max ECU side, we don't get anything there. So this got a break in the wire somewhere. So I took the time to map everything out here, and these are the things that the main relay powers. It's a bunch of things that we don't use, with the exception of the IACV. IACV has 2 power wires and the fuel pump ECU. So the fuel pump ECU, it's not a big deal. We've got an external fuel pump relay at the moment, so I can run the wires. So it's not the end of the world, but that is powered by the main relay. So really we could do away with the main relay and not have a concern about it, but I don't know if that's what the customer wants to do, and I don't know if how the wires are pinned up here, so we'll have to figure that out. Okay, so I got the key on power from the fuel pump ECU. Got that all working. The new fuel pump relay is here. We've got the wires pretty long. I just tested it off camera. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but there's definitely fuel in here now. So that's all working. We gotta button this all up though. So the biggest thing is that I have to find a wire that's going to go from the ECU here to trigger on this relay. But that's basically done. What I've got to do though is I'm going to figure out where I'm going to mount the relay, and then from there I can actually finish up the wiring of where it needs to go. Yesterday I got the fuel pump wired up and tested, and it definitely worked. So today we're going to work on connecting the fuel pump relay to the ECU, and I've got this yellow wire here. So I spent a good portion of the morning trying to find out where these other wires ran. There's two wires that run all the way up to the IJ2 connector, but when I went through it and found the IJ2, and I think this is IJ2, I'm not 100% yet, but I believe it is. Anyways, the pins aren't populated for that. So what's gonna the pin is not populated on this side of the connector, so I can't just make a wire from the ECU to here because again the pin's not populated. There's this connector that's just been sitting out. I have no earthly idea where this one is or where it goes, but it's just been sitting out. So, and I definitely didn't mess with this. So I've got the yellow wire here, and I plan to put a connector on it as well. We do have to run some more wiring out front for the fan switch. So I'm gonna put like a DT connector on it or something. But for now, I've got the yellow one ran to the front. It's not tucked, it's just literally ran, so we can test it. Where we ended up on the main relay side, we are basically going to leave that alone, and I will just run power for the boost control solenoid, because that seems like that's the only thing that the main relay powers on this car, or what's left of it. So on my list yesterday, I took a look at everything that the main relay ran, and the only one that was like of importance was basically the boost controller. So injector power and coil power, from the other day, you know, we figured out that power does not come from the main relay, so we'll leave that alone, and we'll just have to bite the bullet on running a key on switch for the boost control solenoid, and then that should be that. So everything looks like we're coming along here, and once we get our radium fitting for the fuel tank, we'll be able to put that in, and then hopefully this thing will actually start. So for the fans, we're using our fan relay box here. If you guys are interested in this, we do sell them on eBay. So we're going to be using this, and it looks like we're going to hit it in here with some self tappers, I think. And I've also got connectors coming for these. So they use regular splice connectors, and I'd much rather have like an actual plug and play ordeal here. So I've got these T connectors coming, and I'll go ahead and I'll wire those or pin those in once we get them. And then so on my fan wiring though, it's pretty straightforward. You've got 12 volt, this 12 volt eyelet, and then you've got a ground eyelet here. So this you can ground and power anywhere. So this one I'm probably going to put it on the alternator side of it. And then from this end, you've got your trigger wires. And so the trigger wire could be a sensor or it could be ignition, it doesn't really matter. So for instance, if you want ignition power, then all you've got to turn it on, that is, all you got to do is ground this side of it. So you ground the sensor to chassis ground, and when you apply 12 volts, this will activate the relays. Or if you want the ECU to do it, you can put this to 12 volt power, and then this side to your ECU, and the ECU can trigger it on, and then that's totally fine. But we've got to get a couple self tappers, and we'll go ahead and put that in. And just so you guys can see what the inside looks like. So we've got our 2 relays and our 2 fuses that sit inside. So, and it is in a water resistant shell, and that will definitely clean up what was on the car before. So I'm going to go, in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the fuse box here, just because we've got this all situated and we figured this out. So there's no point for this to be exposed any longer, so we can go ahead and start putting this back together. So I got the fuse box all wrapped up, everything situated. There was a ground here that they made, and this ground here was for the starter bypass. I'm pretty sure this car used to be automatic, and so they grounded it so the starter will just key on without needing a neutral safety switch. I'm starting to work on the wideband side of it. So the really cool thing about the Max ECU is that on their harness they have the wideband. It's already has its own harness, and then you just got to crimp it all on. So with this stuff here, the 4 wire, there's 4 wires that are pre-pinned, but the 2, which is 4 and 3 here, those 2 you actually have to run your own separate harness. One's power and the other's to the heater that come off the ECU. So if you look in here, you see I've already pinned 1 here. There's 3 left, so I still have to run the other 2 going inside the car. So it started raining, so we had to push the Supra back in. I was able to get the fuse box mounted for the fan relays. So there was a threaded hole that was already here for a 10 mil, so I added 1 on the other side, but it's nice and sturdy. So now that we have where it's going to live at, we can start working on attaching the rest of these. So we've got ground, power, and then our 2 trigger signals, and then of course the 2 fan wires themselves that need to get done. So but now that we have it mounted, we can actually start working on getting everything mounted, or wired up rather. Okay, so we have the fans mostly routed. We got the 12 volt wire coming off the alternator stud there, and then we got a nice little ground here that's grounded to the chassis. And all we got to do now is figure out these 2 wires. These 2 wires are input wires. One's going to be ground, one's going to be power, and then that will turn the relay over. We just got to figure out which one we want to do. So probably we're going to have ground trigger this. And so what we'll do is we'll take this wire and then we'll send it onto the inside. Now we do have to make like a main relay type wire to supply key on power from the inside to out. And we're going to do that by adding another relay. We'll do that inside the cabin, and the reason why we need that is because we need obviously key on power for this fan, but we also need power for our boost control solenoid. So we'll leave this hanging. I haven't zip tied anything out of the way. I'm just going to leave that as is until we get everything in. So just a reminder, we got to get the 2 connectors that go to the fan to go to this end, these T connectors here, and then we can start cleaning everything up and then finish routing our wiring. All right, so we've got the fans hooked up just temporarily. I'm just gonna test it really quick with my battery. Okay, both fans are moving air, good to go there. All right, so we got the radium piece here. This 10 AN to 6 AN orb, this is obviously an 8. So we got the 6 one just in, we're gonna swap this out so we can put this fuel line on. And then I'm going to just kind of jump the fuel pump wiring for now, just to get the pump to activate, make sure that we don't have any fluid leaks, like any fuel lines or anything leaking on this car. And then fingers crossed, we'll have this thing started. So it's running on max ECU, first one that we got started, so super stoked about that. We still got a long way to go though, but it is actually started.